Hey, welcome everyone to this special episode. Are we talking with Tammy Lane? She's the director of Washington's Armor, a new film now on EpochTV. Be sure to check it out. We'll introduce Tammy now, but basically the film is telling the story of young George Washington. Feature film, full length, again on EpochTV now. I'll bring in Tammy Lane. Tammy, it's a pleasure having you on Crossroads again.
Hi, Joshua. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so last time we spoke, I believe we actually, it was at Capernaum Studios, a studio where we filmed this in Texas. And I remember you were still filming at the time, and well, here we are now. It's all done.
Yeah.
Congratulations first. I mean, it's not, it's Hollywood quality feature film, and we're in an era now where independent filmmakers can do this. It's incredible.
Yes. We tried to get the best quality as possible because we really did want to compete with Hollywood. We want to give a really good product. Sorry, that was my
No
dog.
worries, no worries.
Apologize.
Yeah.
But yeah, we tried to do the best we could. We really hired professional people, professional camera people, and worked with a lot of great people that could pull this thing together. So we're very happy. We're very happy with the end product. So
Yeah, so Tammy, tell us the story of Washington's Armor. I mean, you hit on it's telling about George Washington, but it's young George Washington, not 1776 George Washington.
right.
Most people don't focus on that. Why focus on that side of it? And what's the story here?
Well, I love the stories of like coming to age and people when they're just getting started and finding their purpose for their lives. And so this story starts when he's about 21 years old, and it depicts his very first military commission to deliver a letter to the French to tell them to vacate the land, because this was happening in a time when the English and the French were vying for American soil. Basically, they all wanted a piece of the land, and the American Indians were then siding with either one or the other. So whichever one could best suit their survival is who they would side with. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a time of turmoil, and so it's 20 years actually prior to the Revolutionary War. So you see a lot of stories about the Revolutionary War, but this one is 20 years earlier than that. So
Yeah, and George Washington, I mean, he was, of course, selected to lead the early American armies against the British because of his experience during these wars. And I
mhm.
mean, I've read some of the history, and it's incredible. I like to read a lot of old history books. I was reading some from like the 1800s. They talk about this, and yeah, it was incredible. The French in Canada were fighting a war against the United States, and this was a time when the Americans in the U.S. or prior to the U.S. Were still under British rule, and the French in Canada were still under France. And the wars of Europe were the wars of America, and that's how it was. And as you mentioned, the Native Americans, the Indian tribes here, a lot of people talk about the Indian wars and stuff. They were aligning with the British, or they were aligning with the French, and these were just as much French and British wars as they were Indian wars. And
Mhm.
you show this as well in the film. Even the different tribes that are represented and how they were part of these battles.
Mhm. Yeah, we wanted to try to show, all sides of it because everybody was involved in this. And the like for example, the half king, his dad was killed by the French, and so he did not want to ally with the French. He wanted to ally, and he kind of had a vendetta against the French. And so you see in the battle scene, the Battle of Jumonville Glen, that he kind of acts out that vendetta, um, to because he sided with the British at this time. So yeah, and then you have the Ottawa, and they're on the French side, and so there's just a lot of. It's really interesting to learn about this history. I mean, I didn't know a lot about it, but what sparked it is I read a book called The Bulletproof George Washington, and I read this book about 17 years ago, and this by David Barton, and that story actually is not in the history books. it was taken out. I think it was removed from the history books like in the 20s or something.
Oh wow.
And once I read that story, I really thought, oh my goodness, this is a great story. I really think it needs to be told. And that's kind of what God dropped into my spirit to make a movie about it.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible. There really is so much about American history that's really interesting that is totally not being taught in schools and never shown in movies for some reason, but incredible stories. I mean, you mentioned Bulletproof Washington. I know a big theme of that too is Washington's faith, and everyone says Washington was a deist now. But you don't shy away from really showing some of these old stories about Washington and some of his beliefs. Tell us about this.
Well, and he talked about his faith in writing. He wrote about it a lot. He acknowledged that God was protecting him. So that would, being a deist is like if you make something like he created everything and then God left everybody just to fend for themselves. That's kind of what deism is. But um, Washington believed all the way through his life that God was with him. His mom taught him about the Lord and the Bible and scriptures, and so he, that's in there. It's and we tried to do it like he would do it. He wasn't out there just evangelizing and telling everybody about God all the time, but he did acknowledge that God was protecting him, that God was with him, and so we just kind of play it out that way.
Hmm. Just real quick for our audience, we're going to jump into questions in a bit. So if you have questions, leave them in the chat. You want to hear about George Washington? Any questions about the film itself? Let us know in the chat. We'll get to the questions. Real brief. Also, you can watch Bulletproof Washington free tonight. It's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern time on NTD. You can visit for channel information on that. It's ntd.com/TV. You can find the link in the description below. And after that, it's going to be on EpochTV as well. That's at ept.ms/Washington's Armor. Now, Tammy, we talked briefly about some of the filming with this, and I'm curious, what was the process of filming? Because, I mean, I assume it looks pretty historically accurate. What was the process of kind of finding the costumes and the sets and getting things right?
Well, there was a lot of research for my whole team. We had our wardrobe, makeup departments, and they're all researching and our sets and props and learning. We were all kind of learning this together because we knew the story, we love the story, but then now we've got to figure out how to get this story out there to portray it, because you have to have the minute details of how is this costume made, how accurate do we want to be with the costume, which we really tried to be as accurate as possible. So we got reenactors. Those reenactors, I'm telling you, they are very specific about how the costumes are and were. And so they helped us a lot. We had some great people working with us. Also, wall builders, with David Barton, David and Tim, and they've helped us
Wow.
historically. And so, and there's some things that you have to use, creative license, some things you just can't film or, have the money to film or whatever. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate. And the costumes are pretty much exactly what they look like. We have one costume for Washington that is made out of the exact material down to the buttons and everything. It was really thick wool for his winter wardrobe, and seems kind of uncomfortable. But that's what they wore, and it kept them warm. And so I think it's really cool that even the actors love having the historically correct stuff, so they can really kind of get into their character and feel what it was really like.